mean, Bon and I were good mates. You know, we were mates before the Valentines, and we were mates right through until his death on various levels, as mateships always are. At the beginning, we were two lead singers in a band, and you know, I can remember really clearly when we first started to do shows in Melbourne and Sydney. He and I weren't exactly, you know, arrogant about it, but we were a little bit cocky that we knew that, you know, it was our dual stage act, you know, that kind of made us a bit different to any other band, really, and the songs we chose. And I can remember when we hit Melbourne, we made a band decision. You know, it was a band rule that, and it was a very democratic band, but as anybody will tell you, any democratic band always has trouble and isn't really democratic in the end. You know, the singers really run the show. And we made a pact in the band that we weren't going to do what everyone else was doing at that stage, which is, you know, 66. And that was take drugs and smoke pot. And I can remember Bon and I, when we went up to Sydney one time, and it was the first time either of us had ever had a joint, you know, late in the piece. It wasn't around when you were 15, 16 in those days. We were 20, 21. We went up to Sydney and, you know, we went and saw this band that we knew, and the keyboard player invited us back to his place to smoke some dope, you know, and it was the first time, and we were both nervous as shit. And we went back there and we smoked and got completely out of our head, and we were just shit scared in the corner of the room, giggling and wondering whether we should be there. And eventually we just slid our way out of the room, completely paranoid, and ran down, bursting out laughing, and went back to the hotel, to the one room that we were staying at. It was a hotel called the Crest Hotel in King's Cross, which no longer exists. It's been pulled down, but we went back there. And of course the band knew immediately that we'd smoked, and we got ostracised and told we were going to be kicked out of the band, right? Which we completely laughed about and went and celebrated and went to a club and got shit-faced drunk, because we thought the gall of the band thinking that they could throw us out of the band. And we always used to have breakfast around the corner. We used to go around there, and they used to have fresh orange juice, and we went round there, and we'd always go there because after a hard night's drinking, it's good to have a bit of orange juice. So we went round there, and we were in one table and the band was on the other table, and they wouldn't speak to us because we'd smoked dope, and we were still stoned. You know, we were still stoned. And anyway, eventually what happened was a member of the band came over and said, well, you know, it's okay, we'll let you go this time and we'll let you back into the band. And that was just a funny thing, you know. Bon also had a girlfriend then at that stage, and you know, it was a real bloke thing being in a band, and girls weren't allowed. But you know, and Bon's girlfriend Maria always wanted to be there, and you know, Bon was in love with Maria, and he, you know, sometimes there was trouble, you know. Not when we first went over there, but after a while, because Bon would want Maria along, and she'd be the only girl in the van, and you know, there was an atmosphere in the band and the van that was not good. That was towards the end, but socially, Bon, you know, Bon was the rock and roller. He wasn't a great one for PR. I used to do most of the PR, probably because I had a bigger head than he did, you know, and probably a bigger ego at that stage. And I used to do most of the PR and most of the on-stage patter. Bon didn't talk a lot on stage, he just sang. I mean, he was the real deal, Bon. You know, I was more of a showman, you know, but Bon was the real deal. He didn't do a lot of on-stage patter, and therefore when he did, it was cute and the girls loved it, you know. And he also didn't participate a lot in interviews, didn't like interviews, didn't want to do too many interviews, and so I ended up doing most of them. It's not that I forced myself on it, but it's just that Bon didn't want to do most of it, and I did, and you know, I had the gift of the gab, and you know, said what the journalists wanted to hear in those days at 20, naive as I was. So his socialising really mainly was with musicians, and with gigs and that kind of stuff, you know, and you know, jamming, or you know, that was, and you know, wherever the party was, that was Bon's socialising. And in terms of the band, I mean, he was ambitious. He was, you know, deeply ambitious, but he wasn't even then. He was prepared to play the game, but he played it as you know, exactly as it should be played and not beyond.